Did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
Hi everybody, so today we're gonna have another true crime story. It's going to be about how Lyle and Eric, also known as the Menendez brother, managed to brutally kill their mother and father, and then acting like they did not know what happened until one of them eventually confessed to their therapist, and then soon after explained to the nation why they did what they did. So Josie Menendez, who was the father of Lyle and Eric, grew up in Cuba. He ended up going to America via a swimming scholarship. That's where he met their mother, Kitty, who was a pageant queen and who worked as a kitchen girl. So soon after they met, they ended up getting married. So these two ended up becoming very successful, with their father Josie working his way up to become the head of the record label, and their mother Kitty being a very successful entertainment executive. Because of their father's background of being an immigrant, and him basically being able to make something of himself and push himself to accomplish all his dreams. He was very hard driven and very brutal when it came to helping the boys out with their careers and basically advising them on what to do. Because of that, the boys had no choice but to be successful. Lyle ended up being a very good tennis player, playing for Princeton University, and it was said he had aspirations of eventually venturing into business with his father. Eric was an even better tennis player and ended up being ranked nationally. Eric's swimming coach later on went to the newspaper and told him of how his father was very competitive and was overbearing in some ways, and which had an opposite effect to what he was trying to achieve, because Eric then felt like whatever he did was never enough for his father. So, because of their overbearing and controlling father, the boys started to get into a little trouble. So, when Eric moved to California, he started hanging up with a very bad group of teenagers, and he was later on caught in many burglaries. Lyle, who was enrolled in Princeton University, was soon suspended because of plagiarism. Let's get to the murders of their parents. So at this point, Lyle is 21 and Eric is 18. The police found a very gruesome and brutal scene of their parents in a sitting area in their house. At some point, they even thought the hit was related to the mob because of how they were so unidentifiable, to the point where their faces were shot to the point where you wouldn't even see who they were. So they even thought, like, this can't be a burglary, this has to be mob related. Soon after the murders of Josie and Kitty, the police took the two brothers into questioning. They basically asked them where were they during the times of the murders. They went on to say they were on their way to watch movies that night, and Eric forgot his ID, so they had to go back home and get the ID, and that's when they discovered the bodies of their two parents. When the policemen arrived, they found Eric on the grass, basically crying his eyes out, sobbing of what he had discovered. Months after the gruesome murder of their parents, the Menendez brothers were acting very strange as to how they were dealing with their parents' death. It did not seem like two individuals who had just lost their parents via a murder, and they did not seem to be traumatized at the fact that they are the ones who discovered their gruesome murders. So they ended up spending over $700,000 in their inheritance, and they ended up buying restaurants, Porsches. One of them even bought a Rolex watch, a cheap Wrangler. So this really raised a lot of eyebrows as to how the boys were handling the situation. In 1988, years after the murders of their parents, Eric was caught in the strings of burglaries, and the court basically required him to speak to a therapist. So during these therapy sessions, Eric went on to confess to their parents' killings, and he made it very clear that his brother Lyle was also involved. So in confessing to these killings, he went on to explain to his therapist of he did it because he wanted to put his mother out of misery of his father. Eric's therapist went on to audio tape his confession of how he and his brother Lyle killed their parents. The therapist then confided to his girlfriend at the time, and basically told her of how these two brothers were the ones who were responsible for the famous Menendez killings. So as time went by, this therapist and this girlfriend had a fight, and they ended up splitting up. And soon after they split up, the girlfriend then went to the police, and she basically confessed to having audio tape on the brothers confessing to the murders of his parents. So soon after that, Eric got arrested, and Lyle soon after Eric. But Lyle at the time was in Israel, and he flew into LA and basically turned himself in. Soon after the brothers were jailed, there was commotion regarding the audio tapes that were given to the police because of doctor-patient privilege. I'm not sure if you guys know what that is, but it basically states that your therapist is not allowed to share with anyone your whatever you say during your therapy sessions. So there were lawsuits and there were appeals because of that audio tape. But after 2 years of fighting, the courts did allow it to play a part during their trial. So their trials began in 1993. It was broadcast live on television, and this is where things get very, very tricky and interesting. The Menendez brothers' defense as to why they did what they did was because they went on to say it was because not only did their father abuse them emotionally, but he also abused them physically by molesting them since childhood. They went on to graphically explain the events and how and when it started, when they were being molested from a very young age by the person they called their father.
And how did it start?
Just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this
and it
take
was
place?
in my bedroom.
And how often would this happen?
Like 2 or 3 times a week.
And for how long did this happen?
Not too long. It began to change.
When did it begin to change?
I'm not sure exactly at what time, but almost close to when I was 7.
And how did it change?
Just became more involved.
one of the family cousin went to ABC News, and she basically told them of how she believes the brothers, and that these incidents actually happened because of how Eric came to her one day and told her of what is happening, but she at the time didn't think anything of it. The defense also went on as to tear down Kitty's character, which was their mother, of how she was a drug addict, an alcoholic, and she was afraid of their father Josie, and was tormented of his affairs that he had with so many women at the time they were alive. So their first trial lasted 4.5 months. The jury was hung, meaning they didn't know whether the brothers did it or not. So it was 50-50. So this resulted in a retrial. In 1995, the second trial started, but it was very much different from the first trial, where everything was televised and people basically saw what was happening at the time was happening, and had all the details that were happening in the courtroom. This time it was less sensational. The judge allowed no TV cameras inside, and people basically found out what was the fate of the brothers through newspapers and articles. So the defense on the second trial was that Dr. Ozol, which was the therapist of which Eric confessed to, manipulated him into confessing of the murders. That strategy fell short, and the brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were sent to different prison until 2018, when the brothers were finally reunited and they were able to serve their term together. Thank you so much for watching this true crime story. Please do comment and let me know what you think about this true crime story, and if you think that the ruling was fair. Do you think that the boys deserved the sentence that they received, despite the fact that they told the judge that they were being molested and that's why they did what they did? So just please let me know what you guys feel about this story. Until next time, bye.